Hi, many of us have dreamed of becoming internet stars. But this friend couldn't even dream of that. He didn't even know the internet existed until recently. That's because after returning from the Vietnam War, Frank's life literally stopped for a few decades. But things are about to change dramatically. With you as always, e-movie recaps, subscribe and like, and we'll keep it going. Frank grew up in a very ordinary family, all his childhood helping his mom and dad on a farm in California. But his humble life did not upset him. On the contrary, he learned to enjoy the simple things of life. For example, his relationship with the girl Lindsay, whom he dreamed of marrying. Alas, the young couple's plans were interrupted by the Vietnam War. Frank promised to return from the war as soon as possible, but his stay at the front was a little bit delayed. The guy spent 7 years on foreign soil, a whole year of which in the captivity of the enemy. He was tortured and interrogated, but he managed to still be free. After a while, Frank had to return to his homeland because he was wounded. After leaving the hospital, Frank ran headlong to his beloved's house. But there was a surprise waiting for him. Frank realized that if in his personal life happiness in the near future cannot wait, then you can at least build a career. First, he went to the police academy where he hoped to get because of combat experience, but he was rejected because of his serious injury. So the guy went on interviews where he was given rejection after rejection because of the lack of higher education. In the end, poor Frank had to get out on his own. He started selling hot dogs on the street and did not notice how 40 years passed. But one day everything changes. That day Frank is riding his usual route on a bus, and two skinheads get on it. They start harassing the dark-skinned passenger, demanding to make room for them, but he refuses. Then the skinheads are going to beat up the old man properly, but Frank intervenes. At first he just wants to scare the guys and says that he is not going to fight with them. The bus passengers applaud Frank. What he doesn't know is that one of them videotaped the whole scene. The video goes viral, and Frank gets the nickname Tough Guy. Cops give Frank a ride home like a best friend, and reporters interview him all over the place. And most importantly, how proud his mom is of him. But the euphoria doesn't last long. Soon Frank's mom dies and leaves him a big house and his favorite dog as an inheritance. Now Frank is left with only one close person in his life, his best friend Klondike, also a war veteran. Klondike helps Frank get settled in his new home. They discuss his military past, and Klondike tearfully thanks his friend for saving his life on the battlefield a long time ago. The men dream that life will finally go uphill now that Frank has suddenly become a local celebrity. Then Klondike asks his friend to put a mysterious flash drive, a device that old-fashioned Frank sees for the first time, in the safe and goes out for cigarettes. Leaving the store, Klondike encounters two thugs in a car. They demand the flash drive, and when Klondike pretends to be a fool, they put a gun to his head. Then the man knocks the offenders down and is about to leave, but a shot is fired. Later, Frank is called for identification. He asks the police to do everything in their power to catch the killers of his best friend, and he goes to get a drink. Near Frank's house, he meets a neighbor. She sympathizes with his loss and says that recently her brother was killed in almost the same place as their Klondike. The woman complains that the local police do nothing to solve such crimes, and a little later Frank says all this to a cop he knows. The next day, the man goes to the police station and resents the lack of progress in the case. He is again told that the officers are busy working day and night. Frank finally realizes that he can expect no help from the police and goes to the scene of the crime himself. There he finds 3 pieces of evidence: a fired cartridge case, a necklace, and a necklace. Then Frank goes to the only gun store in town to find out what kind of weapon the cartridge was fired from. The local consultant says that such shells are used only in special weapons for the military and special agents, and he does not have them in his assortment. But the salesman recognizes the girl from the necklace he found and says she is the wife of some black guy named Terrence who lives a few blocks away. The consultant gives Frank directions to his house. The door is opened by an exhausted girl with a child. From their conversation, Frank realizes that Terrence hasn't been home to his wife and 3 children for a long time. and she hasn't seen her husband in weeks. Finally, the girl says that her friends recently spotted Terrence at the basketball court and asks Frank to give him a couple of nice words from her. Frank goes to the court and asks the locals where he can find Terrence. They refuse to tell him anything. Then the signature tough guy punch comes into play. The tone of Terrence's friends changes. They give the coordinates of a certain Ronaldo who may have information. At the address, Frank finds some strange guy in a Holy Father's suit. It turns out that this is Ronaldo's neighbor who mistook Frank for a thief. When he learns the truth, he tells him in which bar Ronaldo chills every morning. In the evening, Frank witnesses an unpleasant scene. His neighbors, a young couple, loudly quarreling on the doorstep. The man leaves, and his wife Amber is left alone with their son Martin. Frank calls the girl to his house to wash the wound on her face left by her violent husband. The three of them have a nice chat and spend a pleasant time. The next morning, Frank goes to look for Ronaldo in the bar. The guys on the first floor recognize him and show that they are not happy to see him. Then Frank has to show his fighting skills again and finally get a pass to the second floor where Ronaldo is sitting. When asked about Terrence, he pulls out a knife and says he's not going to say anything. But when the tough guy shivs Ronaldo's head outside, he quickly gives in. He says that Terrence was dating a girl who gives massages in a salon nearby. Satisfied, Frank leaves. On the way home, the man is stopped by a fellow cop. He says that Frank's showdown has already been rumored all over the city. Moreover, the chief almost issued a warrant for his arrest, and the officer managed to stop him only at the last moment. Frank replies that he can't just sit by and watch his fellow cops sit around the department and do nothing about the death of his best friend. The officer replies that it's not Frank's job, and in that case, he won't help him anymore. Frank goes home and sees that everything is upside down. He doesn't have time to look around, but he feels that some bulky man rakes him from the back. Frank pretends not to know what he's talking about and throws the uninvited guest out the window. Then Frank goes to his neighbor Martin and asks to see the contents of the flash drive Klondike gave him. It contains a map of the city, some building permits, and contacts. Frank doesn't understand what his friend has to do with this and clings to a strange nickname, Panther. Later, Frank goes to an Asian massage parlor, which Ronaldo told him about, and makes an appointment with Tatiana, the master. When Frank says that he's looking for Terrence, the girl is frightened. After the end of his shift, Frank follows Tatiana straight to her house. But when he tries to get in through the window, he is spotted by a neighbor. He does not believe Frank's tales about being Tatiana's boyfriend and demands to come closer. He not only lets Frank go, but also reminds him that his girlfriend doesn't lock the back door. Frank goes up to the second floor and finds Tatiana and Terrence in bed. The guy tries to shoot the stranger, but Frank quickly pins him against the wall and takes him to the kitchen. There he shoves Terrence's hand into the shredder and demands to tell him who killed Klondike and why. Terrence screams in pain and quickly gives up. He says that Klondike was killed by his partner Sebastian, and they were both just doing what they were ordered to do. At first, Terrence refuses to say who is giving the orders, but after another torture with the shredder, he gives up the name of the Panther and where he is hiding. On returning home, Frank again notices a neighboring couple arguing, only this time the man is even more aggressive than before. Frank intervenes and asks him to leave Amber alone. When the husband begins to suspect his wife of cheating with a neighbor, Frank twists him in two and sends him away. Happy Amber throws herself into Frank's arms and says that he looks tired. She suggests that he sleep a little and then come to her for dinner, especially since Martin's son is going to a friend's house for a sleepover. But Frank has no time to sleep. Excited, he prepares for dinner. He puts on his best suit and buys flowers. Amber is enchanted by his new look, and they have a lovely dinner in the fragrant garden. Frank is delighted with the home-cooked meal, and the girl says that it is a pleasure to finally cook for someone who appreciates it. She confesses to Frank that when she got married, her husband was completely different, but now he has irrevocably changed. Later, they sit on the veranda and chat, but when the long-awaited moment of kissing finally comes, it turns out that Martin's friend has been punished and the sleepover has been canceled. But Frank and Amber are not upset. They have a great time together. And at the end of the night, Frank offers them a place to crash while their front door is broken. It's a big day for the cool dude. First, he goes to his fellow cop to give him a flash drive. The man says there's some interesting information inside that got Klondike killed and asks his buddy to take care of the dog if anything happens to him. Then Frank goes to church and confesses to the priest because he is about to commit a big sin. And finally, in the evening, Frank goes to the warehouse, the location of which was revealed to him by Terrence. At first, they don't want to let him in, but when the criminal mastermind Panther hears a familiar voice, he comes out of the shadows. Frank accuses Panther of killing his best friend. The mobster replies that he was only punishing Klondike for stealing something very important to him. He demands the flash drive from Frank, and when he again pretends not to know anything about it, he twists him and puts him in the electric chair. But Frank is no longer frightened by torture. He's been through it many years ago, so he holds out until the last minute and doesn't give anything away. Then the Panther loses patience, leaves, and orders his subordinates to continue. The mobster somehow guesses that Frank has a girlfriend waiting at home, and now he's going to visit her. But he doesn't know that Frank has a plan in his head and a box of matches in his pocket. He grabs the Panther, who is left without a car, and fights him in hand-to-hand combat. But the mobster manages to wound him with a weapon found on the floor and escapes. Near the warehouse, the Panther stops a bus, kicks the driver out of the cab, and drives away. Frank sees this and also gets on the bus, which the other driver gives voluntarily because he recognized the cool dude. Frank almost gets into an accident and gets on the Panther's tail, but he manages to get away. The mobster decides to arrange a provocation. He drives straight into the enemy's head, and at the very last moment, Frank can't stand it and still swerves. His bus overturns. The Panther, in turn, crashes right into the train ahead, but miraculously, both survive. The mobster runs away, and Frank waddles after him. On the way, he meets the skinheads, because of whom he became famous. They hate the man for the fact that because of him, they became a laughing stock, and dream of revenge and shoot a new video, but it turns out not very well. The Panther, meanwhile, already enters the house and meets Amber armed with a knife. But he has no time to even touch her because Frank appears on the doorstep and seals the criminal in the wall. They find themselves on the street and Frank falls to the ground. A little more and the Panthers beat him to a pulp. But Amber suddenly jumps on the mobster's back. She gives her lover time to get up, and Frank finally defeats the enemy. The neighbors hand him, and Amber asks him to treat his wounds as he did for her once. The next day on local TV, there's a story that the cool dude is back, only this time he didn't just beat up some skinheads. He solved one of the biggest corruption cases in town, which involved Mayor Williams and one of the most dangerous gang organizations in the country. For his heroic deed, Frank gets the Order of the Honorable Officer, and they now live a threesome with Amber and Martin. Write in the comments, how do you think a person is able to solve such a lot of problems alone? And also do not forget to subscribe to the channel and put a like on this video to cool retellings come out as often as possible.